The story of modern Greece and Turkey is, honestly, a story of empires rising and falling. For centuries, much of what we now call Greece was part of the vast and powerful Ottoman Empire. This was a complex time, a period where different cultures, religions, and languages coexisted, but, not always peacefully. Greeks, predominantly Orthodox Christians, often found themselves under the rule of Turkish-speaking, Muslim administrators. As the 19th century dawned, a powerful idea swept across Europe: nationalism. People began to see themselves not as subjects of an emperor, but as members of a nation with a shared identity. That idea took deep root among the Greek people. It eventually erupted into the Greek War of Independence in 1821. It was a long and often brutal conflict, a struggle for self-determination against a declining Ottoman power. The war captured imaginations across Europe as a fight for freedom and a revival of classical ideals. After nearly a decade with support from Britain, France, and Russia, Greece achieved independence. A monumental moment, the birth of the modern Greek state, but new borders left many Greek-speaking communities outside Greece. For the Ottoman Empire, the loss was a sign of deeper decline. Once dominant, the empire struggled to modernize and slowly lost territories. That decline continued until the empire's final collapse after World War I. Out of its ashes rose the Republic of Turkey, founded by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in 1923. Ataturk's vision, a secular, modern, distinctly Turkish state. Following the end of the Greco-Turkish War, 1919 to 1922, the newly formed Turkish Republic and the Kingdom of Greece faced a monumental challenge. Millions of people were living in lands where they were now considered a minority. To solve this, the international community, under the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, sanctioned one of the most drastic measures in modern history: a compulsory population exchange. This wasn't a voluntary migration, it was a state-mandated transfer not based on language, not based on culture, but based on religion. Over 1.2 million Orthodox Christians in Turkey were forced to leave for Greece. Around 500,000 Muslims in Greece were sent to Turkey. For the ordinary people caught in this exchange, the experience was devastating. Families who had lived in their towns and villages for generations were given just weeks, sometimes days, to pack what little they could carry and abandon their homes, farms, and businesses forever. They were not moving to a familiar place, but to a motherland many had never seen and whose language they might not even speak. For example, many of the Orthodox Christians from central Anatolia spoke Turkish. Many Muslims from Crete spoke Greek. They were strangers in their new homes, often met with suspicion and struggling to rebuild their lives from scratch. The impact of this exchange was profound and long-lasting, shaping the very fabric of both societies. It created a more homogeneous population in each country, which was the political goal, but it came at an immense human cost. For decades after the population exchange, relations between Greece and Turkey were tense but, relatively stable. That all changed in the summer of 1974 on the island of Cyprus. Cyprus, an independent republic since 1960, had a mixed population of Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. Both communities had deep cultural and historical ties to their respective motherlands. Tensions between the two had been simmering for years, marked by sporadic intercommunal violence and deep political mistrust. The Greek Cypriot community largely favored enosis, or union with Greece, a concept that the Turkish Cypriots feared would lead to their persecution and marginalization. The crisis came to a head on July 15, 1974. A military coup, engineered by the ruling military junta in Athens, overthrew the democratically elected president of Cyprus, Archbishop Makarios. The goal was to install a pro-enosis government and unite the island with Greece. For Turkey, this was an unacceptable development. Citing its rights as a guarantor power under the 1960 treaty that established Cyprus, Turkey claimed it had a duty to protect the Turkish Cypriot minority from what it saw as an imminent threat. 5 days later, on July 20th, Turkish forces launched a military intervention, landing on the northern coast of the island. The initial invasion led to heavy fighting and the collapse of the Greek-backed coup. After a brief ceasefire and failed peace talks, Turkey launched a second, larger military operation in August. This resulted in the capture of approximately 37% of the island's territory, stretching across its northern third. This military action created a massive wave of displacement. Around 160,000 Greek Cypriots fled or were expelled from the north, while about 50,000 Turkish Cypriots moved from the south to the north. The island was effectively partitioned, with a UN-patrolled buffer zone known as the Green Line, running through the capital, Nicosia, and across the island. The Cyprus crisis of 1974 was a point of no return for Greece-Turkey relations. The Aegean Sea, with its thousands of islands and islets, is a place of breathtaking beauty. But it is also one of the world's most complex and contested maritime spaces. The heart of the dispute between Greece and Turkey lies in the very geography of the sea. Greece, possessing the vast majority of the Aegean Islands, some just a few miles off the Turkish coast, claims a territorial sea of 6 nautical miles around each island. According to international law, specifically the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Greece can extend this to 12 nautical miles. However, this is where the conflict begins. From the Turkish perspective, a 12-mile extension would be a casus belli, a cause for war. Turkey says it would turn the Aegean into a Greek lake, cutting off its access from its long coastline to international waters and enclosing naval routes. Turkey, not a signatory to UNCLOS, wants a special, equitable arrangement. It points to islands like Castellarizo, visible from the Turkish coast, which, if given full maritime rights, would project Greek jurisdiction deep into the eastern Mediterranean. The dispute isn't just about territorial waters, it also extends to airspace. Greece claims 10 nautical miles of national airspace, while its territorial waters are 6 miles. Turkey does not recognize the extra 4 miles, leading to frequent dangerous encounters. Turkish fighter jets regularly enter the airspace Greece claims between 6 and 10 miles, resulting in Greek jets scrambling to intercept. These so-called mock dogfights are routine, a risky cat-and-mouse game in the skies where a miscalculation could be catastrophic for both NATO allies. In recent years, the age-old disputes between Greece and Turkey have gained a new, high-stakes dimension: the discovery of vast natural gas reserves beneath the eastern Mediterranean Sea. This turned the waters around Cyprus and the Aegean into a potential energy goldmine, but it also dramatically raised the temperature of the conflict. The key issue revolves around exclusive economic zones, or EEZs, areas extending 200 nautical miles from a country's coastline, giving exclusive rights to explore and exploit natural resources. The problem: where do you draw these lines in a sea crowded with islands and competing claims? Greece, backed by international law, Cyprus, backed by international law, argue islands, regardless of size or proximity, are entitled to their own EEZ. They signed agreements with Egypt and Israel, forming an energy partnership that largely excludes Turkey. From the Greek viewpoint, from the Cypriot viewpoint, this is the legal application of maritime law. They see Turkey's objections as bullying, illegally claiming resources, and view Turkish survey ships as violations of their sovereignty. Turkey rejects this interpretation. It champions Mavi Vatan, or Blue Homeland, claiming maritime rights across vast parts of the Mediterranean and Aegean. Ankara says it's unfair that tiny Castellarizo, just over a mile from Turkey, generates a massive EEZ that boxes in Turkey's 482-mile Mediterranean coast. To counter the Greece-Cyprus bloc, Turkey signed a maritime deal with Libya in 2019, creating an EEZ that cuts across the one Greece claims. Athens called it legally void and a provocation. This gas rush escalated military posturing. Greece sent naval escorts for survey vessels. Turkey sent naval escorts for survey vessels. Looking back at the long and often painful history between Greece and Turkey, it can be easy to feel that conflict is inevitable. From the fall of empires, the division of Cyprus, and the modern-day quarrels over sea and sky, the narrative has been dominated by rivalry and mistrust. Each side holds a list of historical grievances, national traumas, perceived injustices. These stories are powerful, shaping national identities and political rhetoric, often making compromise seem like a betrayal. Yet despite the political and military standoffs, there is another, more hopeful story to be told. Greek and Turkish flags flying side by side at a diplomatic meeting or cultural festival. It is the story of the millions of ordinary Greeks and Turks who share more than just a border. Baklava, dolmades, a musical heritage where melodies flow seamlessly across the Aegean, and a shared spirit of hospitality and family values. Tourists from each country flock to the other, finding not an enemy but a neighbor with a familiar, welcoming face. These deep-rooted cultural connections are a powerful reminder that the lines drawn on maps do not always reflect the realities of the people on the ground. The path forward requires a courageous shift away from the zero-sum thinking that has dominated the past. Dialogue, even when difficult, is the only viable alternative to conflict. Ultimately, the future of the Aegean does not have to be one of perpetual conflict. Greece and Turkey are neighbors, bound together by geography and a history that is as much shared as it is contested. The journey towards lasting peace will be long, but it is a journey that begins with the simple, powerful belief that a shared, prosperous future is not only possible, but necessary.